the first time I realized I was black? I think it was in elementary school.
Yeah.
Because like the neighborhood where I lived as a child, it didn't really have any people that like look at me except for like my direct neighbors, like the person in the next flat next to us. But so like the school that I went to there, like mostly children of like white children and people from Moroccan descent went there as well. But like I think I was the only black girl in that school.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I remember that we were outside just playing or something, and a girl from my class, she came up to me and she asked me like, "Why do you look like that?" Right? And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah, why do you look like that?"
Like what?
And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Do you have that same color underneath your clothing?" Because apparently what she thought is that my face was brown, but like under my clothing, like where my clothing covers me, like I was white probably underneath, right?
Wow.
So I think that was like the first time that I was really like faced with it, like directly, like straight up, just straight to the point, I guess.
How old were you at the time?
I must have been like between 8 and 10 years old, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did you felt? Like, how did you felt?
It's a very long time ago, so I'm not exactly sure like exactly what I thought about it, but it did come back in my mind, a few times.
Yeah.
And I think that's when we started paying attention, like to, okay, well, who around me looks like me, and then I noticed that it was like really just my neighbor and like my direct family, like my sister and mom, so yeah, that was kind of weird for me as a child,
Yeah, but you didn't like see it as like necessarily like a problem, or like for you, you were just like you, and she didn't know that you were the way you were.
Yeah, I don't think I saw it as a problem.
Yeah.
It was just something that I was like, oh, like, that's random, that's weird. And I started paying attention to it, but I don't think I was like disturbed by it, or like upset by it or something.
Interesting. Wow, I've never heard something like that, to be honest. It's really like, something that only a child could say, I hope.
I mean, probably, right?
Yeah.
In this day and age, I hope so.
And how did you then grow up after, like, as you said, like a young black girl surrounded by white people? Like, how was it for you to grow up in this difference? Did you feel like it or not, actually?
I think, because like I went to like a different elementary school after that first one where that girl asked me that question. And then the second one, that one was actually even whiter than the first one. And I felt like...
And was it in Amsterdam? Or
it was also in Amsterdam.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just like, it wasn't even that far away from the first elementary school. But it was kind of like, I think a few kilometers away from the same side of Amsterdam. And I think there, like, the children also were like just very different from me, in the sense that, the way that they were like raised and the way that they were very like middle class people, right? Whereas the school that I went to before was not so much like that. And my own family is also like a more lower class family, right? So I already felt a bit weird about just how different our lives were, and like how children interacted with each other. And I also very much noticed there that just like, everyone was white, like pretty much everyone, like absolutely like in the other school there was at least like some North African or like Middle Eastern children, but there was like none of that there. And I think it was also just a bit of a so this is what it's like, kind of like the first time that you're really aware that you're in a very white space, and that the people are also just like very different from you. Like, for example, they would expect you to like give really expensive gifts or something during birthdays, and I was just like, oh, So I felt like I didn't like really fit in necessarily because of that, and like like really never seeing anyone that looks like you, not even like a teacher or anything, it's just started feeling a bit weird, right? And people would also ask me like questions about like my background and just kind of like that you realize that there's like a cultural rift, a cultural gap indeed, and I was just like, oh, this is a bit awkward, this is a bit weird, you know? Cause there's like questions from curiosity, and then there's questions that are a bit more like, ooh, you're weird, you know? Like you feel the assumption underneath it that they think that you're weird, and that's why they like are trying to like figure you out.
Do you remember like some of these that got stuck in your head? Or?
I think I honestly did my best to like not think about it too much, because I just didn't want to like deal with that, because I was already like uncomfortable on a daily basis, and just dwelling on it didn't feel like, also just they would like ask you questions about like, oh, what does your mom do, or like what does your dad do, or they would have really weird responses to like, my parents are divorced, right, and they would be like, oh, like of course, you know, like, you know, like, what do you mean, of course, you know, like, yikes, you know? And I did kind of feel like I was just also a bit like just trying to like laugh it off, you know, like, whatever, you know? But I do think it like bothered me a bit, because I didn't feel as willing to like open up to them and engage with them if they were going to be like weird about it, you know, like weird about me being different from them.
So you didn't try to fit in?
No, not necessarily. I had a few like friends who were just kind of like, you weren't like that, right? You weren't asking me these like weird questions, and you weren't making all sorts of like weird assumptions about me, and those are kind of like the people that I stuck with, and the other people I just kept like, okay, you know, never mind, you know? But yeah, like, I think also just kind of like parents, that was also often a bit weird, like if you were invited to like a party or something, like a birthday celebration, they would also kind of interact weirdly, I feel, with my mom and us, because like they also were kind of like expecting you to like bring big gifts, right? And we just didn't have the means to like buy big gifts, right? So we'd still bring a gift, but you felt that they were like kind of like disappointed or something, you know? And I was always like, ooh, okay, you know what? Never mind then, you know? I mean, I think, especially as a child, when you're still in like your formative phase, like when people respond kind of like in this icky way to you, you just have a tendency to just be like, okay, never mind.
It's true. And in these moments, like, because like for example in your family, are you the only child or the eldest, or do you have like other people that could like guide you, you know, like in this that already went through that, and with who you could talk to?
So I have a younger sister.
And
like my family came over to the Netherlands like by themselves, so I didn't necessarily have many people in my environment who could like have experiences with this, right? Like I was the oldest, I was the first to go through these kind of like experiences. And like my mom also didn't necessarily like know much about like how other children, you know,
would experience
that. So I was kind of like the first one.
Wow.
So that was
must have been extra tough. Really great for that. But then I'm also like so wondering, as like a young woman, like discovering the, you know, like her femininity and love and relationships. How was it? How did you felt in that? Did you ever felt for example, fetishized, or like you wanted to resemble others, or not really? Like were you always like good in like how you look like and like who you are, basically?
I think for me, I already felt like, you know, I guess like less desirable than like maybe other people in my environment did, because I felt like, oh, I don't look like this. Like, for example, I didn't have straight hair, you know, like there was a pretty long time that I was always trying to just like hide my hair as much as possible, you know, because I felt like, okay, well, it doesn't look like that, so I was trying to slick it down and stuff like that. Like my mom never allowed me to like relax it, but there was a while where I kind of like really felt like, but you know, that would make me pretty, and people would also say it to me like, oh, you would look so pretty if you had straight hair, you know, and that kind of like further
people said that to you.
Yeah, people like would generally be like, yeah, you should straighten your hair. You look so pretty, and it makes you feel like, okay, well, so I guess I'm not pretty now then with my hair as it is, you know. I mean, I don't think their intentions were to like, you know, really make me feel insecure or anything, but in their head, like straight hair is pretty, right? So that's what they were conveying to me. But yeah, I think, you know, I have pretty like low self-esteem. So I never really felt like very much like people saw me as attractive or anything. And it was something that I was kind of like, oh, I wish I was more pretty, or I wish I was more like attractive or something, but I didn't necessarily do much to like change how I presented myself or anything. I think part of it, that was like my mom like allowing me to, because my mom was very proud of like, you know, the African aesthetic, or like how we African women like present themselves and look and stuff like that. So I think that was really.
Can I ask where you're from?
My mom's from Ghana.
Okay.
And
yeah, so she wanted you to feel like how she feel as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so. And I think also, you know, like how like boys in class would kind of be like interacting with girls, like flirting with them, and like trying to, you know, horny teenagers or whatever. Like I noticed that, like, you know, those were only going to like certain girls, right? And those girls tended to look a certain type of way, like long hair, like usually blonde, pretty much always white. So it's just like, okay, yeah, whatever, you know, just trying to shrug it out. But yeah, I think also like people would just kind of like keep making these little comments about your appearance, and at some point I had this not a sleepover, but like, you know how you go like after school, you just go out with one friend and you hang out after school, and they're like, you know what, we should do your hair, right? And I was just kind of like, I mean, maybe not. It might be so fun. And so like they took my hair out of like the brace that it was in, right?
Yeah.
And it just started like going like big, right? Like, and they were like trying to use this
tiny.
Yeah, like they had this fern, but it had like those, like, you know how like people with like really loose curls, they have those like diffuser parts on the fern that's like really wide.
Yes, I see.
So that it like floofs your hair a bit.
Yeah.
But that's not what you're supposed to use.
Oh my god.
So like half of my hair was like still in the braids, and the other half was like.
Oh my god.
And I remember just being like, ooh, this is not gonna end well. And they were like trying.
Oh my god.
And they just kind of like, you saw them like grow frustrated. And it just wasn't working the way it was supposed to work, you know?
Yeah.
And at some point they were just like,
we're just gonna leave it like that.
I literally came home with like my hair like that. And my mom just like looked at me. She was like, I was so embarrassed, you know, just like out there, just, like, wild hairs on the streets, like what the fuck?
Oh wow.
But yeah, like eventually I think I more started like to see like, you know, the beauty in like what I look like. So like partially because of my mom, but also because like I was like more on the internet and like seeing people who look like me, you know, like, maybe like just online on like Tumblr or like places like that, and you could like follow tags that were more specific, and I was like, you know, you know, Ghanaian or African, you know, stuff like that, and I saw more and more like, oh wow, you know, like, because I feel like also the way that Black women are like portrayed here can be a bit like, do you know who Desna?
No, I don't.
It's this like TV personality. It's like this black man who like dresses up as a woman and like has like these really like red lipstick and these humongous fingernails and like you know, like a wig or something, and like the joke is like that she's kind of like over the top and kind of, but not in like a way that's it's her like self-expression, but more like, oh, we're making fun of black women, you know, like black women are like kind of stupid, like over the top, you know, like bad taste, things like that. So like when you see images like that on TV, it's not gonna, you know, help your confidence, I think, personally. And you know, also like in general, there's not that many like characters in TV shows or whatever that like look like you. But the more I, you know, was on the internet, I was like, oh, you know what, this is also like this is also what a black woman can be. And I think that helped with my confidence, and I kind of like snapped out of the whole like, oh, I wish I looked like that, you know.
Yeah, and that like when was that? Like this moment when you started to find yourself elsewhere?
I think it was honestly like after I graduated high school. Like there was a year in between like high school and university that I was just kind of like working and making money, just like trying to just engage in hobbies more and stuff like that. And I think that's when I really found these places and I was like, oh wow, you know. Like before that I wasn't necessarily like actively like loathing or anything, but this was more like just a thing in the back of your head, you know. But I think when I graduated high school, I kind of left that behind me.
Yeah, kind of like a new chapter somehow.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
living like the only white environment and like thinking more about like yourself and how do you think you would like to portray yourself and these kind of things.
It was also when I started to have a bit more like freedom about like the type of clothing and stuff like that I wanted to buy for myself. So I think that also like helped. Like at that point it was more like my own decision, like, oh, how am I going to portray myself than it was before.
So would you say that like you started to find yourself then at this moment more or less? Or would you not say it like that?
I feel like it was like the start of it, right? Like maybe like the moment where I started kind of like finding myself, but I think it still took quite a while before I properly like could say like, oh yes, this is me, this is how I want to present myself. I think it's also because, you know, right after that I went to Delft, and Delft is even whiter than Amsterdam is. So you have to take that into consideration as well, I think. But
yeah. And you also talked about so the media here in the Netherlands, and would you say that it has changed through the year, like the representation of black women? Like, do you see yourself more and more, or what would you say about this, like the Dutch media? Is there a change?
I mean, I think I'm seeing a bit more of it, you know, but also maybe not necessarily always in like the way like, oh, it's like, I think there's a certain type of black women that the Dutch media likes, right? And it's typically like biracial women, or women who look maybe like a bit more like ambiguous, you know.
With big curly hair.
Yeah, like really big curly hair, like not too dark, kind of, you know. So it's just like, oh, it's nice that, you know, that kind of representation is like going up, but it wasn't necessarily like that I can say like, oh wow, that's just like me, you know. There was still very few like programs, and even then it was also often still like very stereotypical. Like, you know, there's black girls of all sorts of interests, but it was always like kind of like, oh, the loud, rude one or something that would then be like a black girl, you know. And so it's kind of like, do you think like all black women are like loud and rude? I don't think so, you know. But I think now, like the few recent years, there's like more of a push for like actual like good representation and more like diversity in Dutch TV and stuff. But I also stopped like watching Dutch TV a while ago because I just wasn't seeing myself and I wasn't interested in it. So I was just like, I'll just go with somewhere else. So
I understand. And then, so how is it for you? Because you talked about Delft, and so this is also where you're studying. Can you tell a little bit more about this? How is it for you as a black woman student to be in this environment. What does this environment look like? Is it mostly white or masculine, or how do you evolve in that?
Yeah. So like Delft in general is, so Delft is a pretty small place. It's very much like a student city, and it's like, because it's like a University of Technology, there's like, which is, you know, typically considered like a male field. There's way more like male students in Delft than there is female students. And in general, most of these are either like international students or just, you know, Dutch students. But the international students, there's a bit more, I would say, diversity there. It's typically a lot of like people from Asia. And then the Dutch students is pretty much just white, just pretty much just white, right? Like for example, in my year, when I started my bachelor's in TU Delft, I was the only black woman in like my entire year of like 350 students.
Wow.
And I think even if you look at like all the years, like there's like maybe like 4 or 5 black students there, and like maybe half of them are like women, the other half dudes. But like it's just very much also the curriculum is not necessarily based like around people very much, but even like among like the teachers and the professors and stuff, there's like pretty much all, you know, white people. And I also feel like Delft students don't necessarily realize how there's a severe lack of diversity among their student body. And I also feel like Delft students there's a very particular type of person who like thrives in that environment, and they also kind of like expect you to kind of like become that, or at least try to be that. There, right? So even if you have like maybe very different tastes or like very different interests, you're supposed to be that so that you can like be part of the group, right?
And what is this type?
It's very much the like, you know, beer loving, like wild party animal, like, you know, people who like to chug, people who like to kind of like act like they're very like high class, you know, like they have this whole culture in which they're kind of like look down on other people, and we're like, yeah, we're like the intellectuals, or like the tip top of society kind of energy, you know, which I was never really into. So then it already becomes kind of hard to like be part of the group, because a lot of Delft socializing happens within those like associations that people like that are part of, right? So if you're not part of an association, you're already like going to have a lot more difficulty like socializing. And I was just kind of like, from the get-go, I was like, nah, this is not me. I'm not even try to like push myself to be like that. And I feel like, you know, it's given that there's already like a severe lack of like anything that isn't white there. If you then also like, you know, maybe like a black woman or something who's trying to be like themselves and be more like, you know, open about their culture or something, you're gonna have a difficult time either way, like, because like there isn't like other black women that you can go towards to like maybe like interact like that. So yeah, there's no people who are like you. There's very few people who are not like the like party animal student type, you know. So it becomes very difficult, you know, as a black woman. And I'm mostly speaking from like my own experience, because there's definitely black women there.
Yeah, no, of course.
But I personally felt like really awkward, because like sometimes, for example, like the teachers during the lecture would make like some sort of joke about like dark-skinned people, and then everybody would be like, you know, look at you, because you're like the literal one black person in the room. And that
like racist jokes, or
yeah, like pretty much racist jokes where we'd be like, oof. You know, like, not like, haha, that's kind of funny, but straight up just like, sir, what?
Excuse me, what did you just said?
So, yeah, I feel like I never really felt like truly comfortable like being open with people there, just because they didn't seem very receptive to it. And like the few people that were also like kind of like difficult to find, you know?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, socializing primarily happens in those associations, so if you're not part of those associations because you know, don't want to be part of that kind of culture, then it's gonna be a lot more difficult. But yeah, like, even in the years like after me, I still don't see many black women or even black people in general.
Yeah, because now you're in your master.
Yeah, exactly.
So
and I'm still barely seeing any. I mean, of course, it's like been more difficult because of the pandemic, so we've not been in the building very much.
Yeah.
I still believe. I'm pretty sure that there's still very, very, very few black students there. But even like, because I remember going to Leiden University for my minor. That was like a half-year program at Leiden University, and I was like I went into the building. I was like so shocked that there was like so many black people there, and just people like from all sorts of places in the world, which even more made me realize how white my university is. I was just like, wow, okay, so this is possible because this is the same Netherlands, the same like province even, and it's like worlds apart.
But how come?
I honestly really think it's the culture, like in Delft, that people who are not like white and like, you know, like that don't feel comfortable there. Because I remember like the first time when I went there for like the open day where they show you around and stuff and they tell you about the programs, I was also kind of like, I don't really enjoy the vibe here, you know? Because even, you know, like, I think there's like The Hague and Delft are like right next to each other, but like if you go to The Hague, it's a very different experience than if you go to Delft. Like on The Hague, you'll walk on the metro station or like the tram station area, and you'll see more black people just around the trams than you see in like the entirety of TU Delft.
Wow.
So it's a very different experience, and I think people feel a bit unwelcome, you know, like when they walk, they go to TU Delft and they're just like, like white people everywhere, and they're all like a very specific type of white people as well. And you know, if you don't feel comfortable with that, then I would also probably not go to that university. Like if it wasn't for that university being one of the few places in the Netherlands where they offered that specific studies that I wanted to do, I also wouldn't have stayed in Delft. I wouldn't have gone to Delft. And I also
so it was not really by choice that you ended up there.
No. No. If like in any other city, like in the Netherlands, they would have that studies that was like close to the Randstad, I would not have gone there. Like just no. Yeah. I just because I feel like also a lot of those students that I described, they're also just like really not aware of how white Delft is, you know, because they probably like grew up in very white environments themselves, and they don't really notice it, you know. But like for me, every time I walk into the lecture hall, I'm like, wow, wow, you know, like it's very very white out here. And you know, they have a bunch of like associations in Delft. Like for example, you know, like most like. There's like one for Indian students, there's one for Surinamese students, there's one for students of like African descent, but you can, like, you immediately notice like they're not mingling as much with like the Dutch students, right? Because I don't think these Dutch students are aware, but like they're really creating kind of like a rift between themselves and like all the other students.
How do they do that? Or how do you feel this?
It's like hard to describe, but I feel like also just like in how they express themselves. Like a lot of these, like for example, like they have this, what do you call it? Like when you join the association, they have like a period of time that like introduces you to them, and they do like all sorts of like things, like they'll drop you somewhere and you have to like kind of find your way back to the association. Those kind of like things. Like, a lot of people are just kind of like, you know what, never mind, I don't want to deal with this, because it also feels like almost sadistic sometimes, you know, where it's like, you're going a bit far, you know, like, somebody who might not be as comfortable with like, you know, drinking until they drop or something, like, saying no is not really like an option in these kind of environments, so then the type of people who like don't like that, they just, you know, they just.
And I can imagine very masculine environment as well, and like.
Exactly. But I also just kind of thought that like most other universities were like that until I saw other universities. Like, wow, this is worlds apart. Holy shit.
Crazy. But I'm also wondering then, like, how was it during the Black Lives Matter movement? Or like last year, because...
I mean, honestly, I didn't notice much of it, like, at all. Like, my faculty has like an association, and they had like one post where they were like, yeah, we stand in support of like Black people, and
that was it.
It was very quiet on like the Delft side, and we do have like for the whole university like a diversity officer, but they're still like very much focused on just getting like more women in. Like that's still the level of diversity that they're like, they don't even looking at like other types of diversity. Like I remember seeing the post and it's like, oh yeah, we have a new diversity officer in Delft, blah blah blah. And I was like, wait, what? Diversity in Delft? Wow, like, and it said something about like, yeah, they've been doing a lot of work. I was like, a lot of work where? Because I'm not seeing
on what,
any kind of like, and it's like, yeah, but more women. And I was like, okay, we're still in that phase, huh?
Wow, that's really intense. It's super intense.
Yeah.
And then like,
I mean, I can understand if universities are like very like far in the Netherlands and like more the areas where there's just like a lot more white people where it happens there. But like, I feel like Delft doesn't really have an excuse.
I know, yeah, because it's very close to Den Haag, as you said,
example,
which is like quite a big city and.
But
yeah. And then like yeah, I was also wondering like when are the moments like that you feel hyper visible, but this I think I know, but when are the moments that you feel like invisible?
Yeah, I mean, it's also just kind of like in like the like for example they'll give examples of like chief design officers or something, and they'll be like, oh yeah, look at all, and then they show like a slew of like white men, and you're just kind of like, okay, well, could you not find any examples of even just women, Black women perhaps, who are also doing like great things in the field of design, you know? It's like, I don't feel like people really consider like Black women like, oh, these can be like great designers too. Like the image of a great designer still is very much like a white older man. But I feel like it's also like their responsibility to also show us other types of people that have achieved this kind of thing. And even just maybe try finding some teachers or something that have a different background than also just being a white person.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like also, because we have a bunch of like quotes that are like about like inclusivity of products and stuff like that, but then they're still very much focused also on like ability, you know, and not necessarily like other types of cultural backgrounds or any type of like insight into how maybe other people in the Netherlands experience themselves. Because like, you notice, for example, that during the program, like most people design for like white affluent people in the Netherlands, and just forget about like everything and everyone else, which I also find frustrating.
Yeah.
But I feel like in general, like yeah, I feel pretty invisible in Delft, you know. Just not just in the sense of like, oh, I know that, you know, there's no other people like me, but also it just doesn't feel like I'm catered to, like in my interests or in things I want to explore. Like there's not really like opportunities for that in Delft, you know. Like even for example, like fun events or something, it's always like very much like, oh, this is what Dutch white students like, and never really other activities that are much more like, I don't know, multicultural or something. It doesn't even have to be like specifically black, even just multicultural is apparently too much to ask for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just constantly feeling like, oh, I wish I was somewhere else, you know? Oh, I want to go back to Amsterdam. So I'm like, never really down for like staying in Delft. Also, it's like, as soon as I graduate, I'm out of here. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, this is just not the environment for me to thrive in, I think. Yeah.
And it's funny because regarding Delft, Amsterdam is extremely multicultural. But coming from Paris, like the first time I arrived in Amsterdam, and especially because I was in the south, I was like, wow, there's no black people at all.
That's like even more worlds apart.
Yeah, so I think if you're going to Paris, you're gonna have like, whoa. No, it's funny how like the place where you are can really like, I don't know what I want to say. Sorry. But so where would you rather be? So is it like, do you think like Amsterdam is really like for you like a good place, or would you still want like to actually like because you're saying, for example, that you don't see like an example of women designers or like black women. Would you actually like also want to go to Ghana, for example, and try to find out for yourself? Or I don't know, I'm also like super curious about this, that like, because it's like Delft is such a contrast to then who you are in the way that you describe it. And then would you rather find yourself, like, where would you rather find yourself in the future? Or
That's a good question. I feel like in general, I'm now just very much in the get out of Delft mode. And you know, since I'm from Amsterdam, I felt like it makes sense like to go there first, right? And then maybe from there see where I can go. But I have also kind of like maybe like a sense of like, well, I don't really know where like black designers are. Like I've seen like there's a lot of these initiatives popping up now. Like for example, Where Are the Black Designers? Which is like a worldwide organization that's really trying to like highlight black design and just showcase what black designers are also capable of doing. Because like, there's very, very few in general. Like, no matter where you go, I think. And also because like design is something that's very much like, in the way that I practice it, it's like still very much up and coming. So there isn't that many places that are already like very deep into that. So that makes it all very, very difficult to figure out, okay, where am I going to go? Because I don't know where really the places are where, you know, people like that work, people like that are like living and making things happen. So I think I'm very happy that there's like organizations like that who are trying to like figure that out, you know, trying to just like stimulate more black people and like black women also to do more design basically. But I think we still have like quite a while to go before this like really seeing like effect, right? Because it takes a few years for people to get training and start their careers and to like really start having impact, I think. But yeah, like if I'm just looking at the Netherlands, I'm like, you know, I'm going to go to either like The Hague or Rotterdam or Amsterdam. Because I think those are the places in the Netherlands where I can find, you know, people of different cultures and generally more black people than maybe in other places in the Netherlands. And where also like the cultural scene is a lot more developed than in other cities in the Netherlands. and then just like kind of figure it out from there, I think.
Okay. I have a question that kind of just popped up in my mind. It's like, where would you consider home? Like, what would you consider home, or where would you consider at home?
Yeah. I think at first, when I was living in Amsterdam still, I was just kind of, I felt like nowhere was really home.
Yeah.
Because in part, I felt like I just wasn't seeing the kind of diversity that I'd like to see, and I didn't necessarily feel like Dutch or like accepted by Dutch people as Dutch,
Mm-hmm.
But then I went to Delft, and there I felt like truly out of place, like just very, 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 like much, like almost like those experiences that I had in Amsterdam, but like tenfold, right? And then I was like, you know what? Every time I went to Amsterdam, I was kind of like literally, like as I was as the train rolled into the station, I was just like I could feel my body just kind of like letting go of like tension that I didn't even know was there.
Yeah.
So it was almost like a very like bodily experience for me to like come home to Amsterdam, even though I might not have literally considered Amsterdam very much like my home before that point. But yeah, I also just feel like places where I can like truly be myself, which is usually with like family, friends, is like for me what I now consider home.
Yeah.
Because I almost like I maybe didn't even like realize like always when I was like completely able to be myself and when I wasn't, like when I was always kind of like hiding at maybe this or that, and just trying to like blend in more. At some point I was like, okay, you know what? When I'm here with you, I'm like truly not like hiding any part of myself, or, like editing myself to be more, I don't know, palatable to someone. So it's just kind of like, okay, you know what? This is just where I'm home,
Yeah. Feeling comfortable within yourself.
Yeah, just completely at ease, not thinking like, oh, whatever, I need to like, use these kind of words, or like have this kind of body language, or laugh at this person's jokes even though it's not funny, and things like that. So, yeah.
Okay. And I think my last question would be, why did you decide to join today here with me, like this talk, and yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think when I saw like the call for like participants to do the interview, it mentioned like, oh yeah, I need to interview like Black women, right? And I was just like, I feel like more like the particular experience that Black women have, especially in the Netherlands, I feel like it needs to be highlighted more.
Yeah.
I just feel like a lot of people, even people who don't wish like necessarily like harm or anything on like Black women, because of a lot of like ignorance, are also just kind of like not aware of like how they're maybe accidentally harming Black women. So like the more these kind of experiences get put to the foreground, the more people talk about it, I think the better, right? So it's just like, maybe if I can provide that, like, I would like to help others, like,
yeah.
So, the next generation of Black women in the Netherlands don't have to just kind of deal with the same struggles that I did.
Yeah.
It takes up so much energy also, energy that could have gone into like maybe creativity, just building experiences, stuff like that. So any push towards like more exposure of Black women is, in my opinion, just like better, like, gotta keep doing that,